everyone, and welcome to a new show called Galaxy of Fiction. My name is Nick Adam Poling. I am a host of another YouTube show out there called The Monster Report. Check it out sometime. Be glad to have you. And I am joined by...
And I'm Joao, and I'm glad to be here. We've worked together in the past, just one other time on I've got a lot of podcast experience in the past. Little rusty at this. Haven't really done any kind of a show in about 9 months, so just excited to be here and talk about fandom. All kinds of different fandom, I think, is what we're going to get into. So I think we're just going to start this off, and I think the first topic will just show you what kind of stuff we want to talk about on the show. It'll be variety, but why don't you start us off, Nick?
Yeah, so we've got some topics that we like to talk about. Sometimes we just got a question. It's like, what makes a good whatever? Insert this. And we always kind of talked about movie fights. There's all kinds of conflict, and conflict makes for a great movie. Because if you don't have conflict, what do you have? Just a bunch of people walking around and saying, hey, there's got to be a conflict that makes us engaged in the story. So, what is it that makes a good movie fight? And maybe we can throw out some examples of our favorites, and maybe some even like categories of fights. Even sometimes the worst fights that are out there. So, I think of just a fight. Obviously, there's the physical fight, and I even sometimes think of a conflict that can happen between people that is not in the physical sort of way. Sometimes it's even in sort of like a debate sort of way. Even right now, it's funny, we have this whole big political story drama that's going on in Washington, and that's why I'm glad you guys are joining us here, because this is a lot more fun. We talk about things that are much more important, which is fiction and fantasy and sci-fi and the things that make us smile. And
I think we're definitely going to try to stay as far away from politics or anything that it resembles, unless it's in a fictional universe, of course.
Right.
We'll talk about fictional politics.
Exactly, yeah. Which, it's not necessarily fictional. I actually think, did you ever see Frost Nixon? It's that interview with Richard Nixon movie. Yeah. And that's a conflict. That's actually kind of a on-screen fight, if you will. It is a debate. It is him trying to draw out of that, that character, Richard Nixon, which is a real person, of course. But I thought that was kind of an interesting thought when I thought of a fight, a man versus man sort of way.
Right.
That makes for a good conflict. We don't need to necessarily talk about that, but, I think, what is it that does make, if you were to pose that question, what does make a good fight?
Well, guys, I think the thing that makes with anything, I think what makes something good, I think the first, especially when you're talking about movies, and you can kind of go into a bunch of different categories, and a fight is no different. It's chemistry. You got to have that chemistry between the characters, whether it's a negative chemistry or a positive chemistry that leads to a betrayal, and now I'm going to have to fight you, or I'm going to have to get revenge, or whatever leads to that motive. But if it's a fight between two characters that I care about one of them but not the other, or maybe neither one of them, then how interested are you in that fight? So the most important thing is character development, and the character development with those two characters, engaging with each other, and how their relationship either evolves, or can we imagine what their relationship was in the past? Have we been given enough details to say, okay, yeah, this guy has a grievance against this person, and they have a right to be mad, and they have a right to want to get in a fight with them. So just as a very broad example, I think chemistry is where I'm going to start this conversation off.
And whether you like that one character or not, do you find yourself, and it's okay to say yes or no to this, do you find yourself rooting for one versus the other?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And sometimes you end up kind of rooting for the bad guy. I think a great example of that is like not necessarily that he's like in one-on-one fights, but confrontations. Hannibal Lecter, where he's a guy that you want him to escape, even though he is a serial killer. There's something about his personality and his charm, and especially in the original Silence of the Lambs. Not that they've remade Silence of the Lambs, at least not that I know of.
No,
they made some other Hannibal movies that weren't up to the same quality, and I think Hopkins regrets. I think he's said as much that he regrets doing. I actually like the Hannibal movie. The Red Dragon is forgettable,
very forgettable.
But
in fact, what did you just say? I don't even know. Yeah, I know what you mean. But yeah, he had such an iconic character that
and it's like the policeman in the second one is chasing him, and he disembowels him, and you're like, good, that cop cop got what he deserves. It's the way I'm watching it, and in no way is that a political statement at all, and it's really not. So I don't mean it that way, guys. So don't take it that way. But in the context of that movie, the cop was seedy anyway. Like, he was a corrupt cop, and not that he was any worse of a person than Hannibal Lecter, but you already are rooting for him. You don't want him to get caught by Clarice. You want him to get away. And so, yeah, that's like and there's all this conflict and confrontation in the movie, and in the book as well. But it just, it's one of those things where you can end up rooting for the bad guy. And a more recent example would be Thanos. I just do not, in the next Avengers movie, if he fought like maybe Iron Man again, and Iron Man being my favorite Marvel character, my heart is going to be split here, because I don't want him to kill Thanos, because I think Thanos is such a rich character, and he's so fascinating to me that it's like I don't want to see him go, but I'm kind of preparing myself for the inevitable that arc has to end.
Well, because he is the villain, and obviously we've got our heroes, our villains, and speaking of villains, we're both big Star Wars fans, and I think even in the theaters when we're watching Rogue One, all of us kind of had that dichotomy going in with us, seeing Darth Vader, just going to town, and then it's like, go, what am I doing? I can't believe it. What, I'm rooting for the villain. Yes, go. So you do kind of find yourself there is something to be said about rooting for the villain, because they make such a great villain. And I think some of the more memorable villains that are out there. I'm also a big Star Trek fan, guys. So yeah, we got Kirk bobblehead here. So Wrath of Khan. I don't know if you've seen the Star Trek films. Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan. You actually never see those two characters in the same room together. They're always communicating, over video screen and radio or whatever. Their voices are in conflict. Their actions are in conflict with each other. Khan wants Kirk dead. He wants this guy completely, wiped out of the galaxy. And so there is that conflict. We never see them together, and you actually kind of like that villain, and you kind of like the conflict that's going on between the two of these for the reasons that they have to, somewhat hate each other, if you will, or at least, Khan hating Kirk. And but you never actually see a physical confrontation between these two characters.
And that's the great thing when you start thinking about topic. Like, the first thing that's running through my head is like, I'm trying to think of something from action-heavy movies and trying to think of these examples when we're putting a show together here. And it's like, so movies like The Matrix jump to your mind. You've got Neo, and then the action is so great, and the technology was a little bit ahead of its time, and the way that they did the cinematography and the first trailer of I remember going into The Matrix, and you didn't know what it was. Like, what are they doing here? And you see a girl spinning around, kicking people in slow motion, and you're like, what is going on in this movie? And then finally the reveal comes, later in that movie. But it's not like today where you get more of a feel with those trailers. But yeah, I was thinking of movies like The Matrix, like where does like these great, but to a point, and I think we've both been making it, is that a fight doesn't have to be hand to hand. It doesn't have to be a Liam Neeson movie. It doesn't, what I mean? It doesn't have to just be an action sequence. A fight can be a conflict. That's really what it is. It could be a verbal confrontation. All the memes out there for Infinity War are the verbal jabs that Doctor Strange and Thanos are throwing at each other. Right. Not scenes from an actual fight. Doctor Strange is basically sitting down, kind of hovering almost over him, looking down upon him as if he's this supreme being, and he's looking down upon this like fallen angel, basically. Like, what are you doing with this genocide and stuff? So it kind of has that look to, and then there's that verbal conflict between those two, and people love that scene in that movie. So as a more modern representation for our audience, I'll just throw that back out there. So if you hear me say Infinity War a lot, you'll just get the point that I love the movie. Yeah, but that's the point, is that it can be a verbal back and forth, and sometimes words win battles. That if you get the right people to your side in a speech or something like that. I mean, it could be multiple examples where we see Bill Pullman in Independence Day, where he makes the speech and riles everybody up. We celebrate our Independence Day. So I mean, it's not directed at the aliens, but it's a motivator for all those other people. We've got a shot. We're alive still. We've got a shot. So And then that builds to the conflict because we don't get to see the aliens talk. We're not talking to the aliens. They can't speak English in that movie. So the conflict has to be built. What do we feel from the human perspective, and why are these aliens bad? They're trying to kill us, obviously. But if you go a little deeper, and then so I mean, it could really be anything, and that's the great thing about perspective is you can kind of go any which way you want to.
And I think the thing about that is the rooting for the underdog side of things. What makes for good drama in your conflict is that kind of thing. Why is it the underdog might at the end of the film come out victorious, and I think of the Rocky films, it seems like...
I was going to say we see the same thing in sports. Why do people... Because we want to see the real life drama unfold, and obviously in sports films they replicate that stuff like in Rocky. So,
Rocky, Mighty Ducks.
The final game in the football, in any given Sunday, they don't blow the team out 50-0. It's going to be a close game that comes down to the final play because it's drama. You don't script a 50-0 blowout, or a knockout in the first round to end the movie. Maybe to begin the movie, but not to end the movie.
Exactly. Yeah, I think of that when I think of the Rocky. As a kid, Mighty Ducks. These kids, they're a ragtag group that he found on the streets playing, and it's like, how is this team ever going to beat the real professional clean cut team and all that? So there is something to that, and obviously sometimes it's a little predictable, isn't it? But at the same time, even if we do kind of predict it, I'd say. But we were engaged in it. It brought us in. It drew us in because we did, like these characters for a certain reason or not.
And there's a reason we go back, and this guy, Joseph Campbell, if you read any of his stuff, you'll get into that. Why do we keep going back to the same themes and stories? Why do people keep creating the same kind of stories? And why do we always receive the same kind of, why do we accept those same stories over and over? Why is Star Wars considered the modern myth, the modern mythology? Because George Lucas read this guy and kind of based things in mythology and in the tragedies and things like that. The old stories, the stories you hear that are just told from generation to generation, not necessarily way before movies were being made. Just these stories that have gone throughout human, and it's always the same. You see it a lot in religion, where there's all the different religions have a lot of the same concepts in them too, because it's either somebody's right and everybody else is wrong, or they're all wrong. Who knows what the real case is? But at the end of the day, it's stories we tell for moral reasons, like this is good, this is bad. It's a societal thing, and it has a place and an importance in society. So I just think that you see a lot of where that comes from, and it really speaks to. Why do we keep watching movies where we know what the outcome? We know the good guys are going to win this, or they're probably going to win. Maybe one guy dies, but the rest of the team is going to find a way to win this, and then everybody else lives happily ever after. So it's just that kind of dynamic where it's like, but that's as humans, and we've kind of evolved in our brains. It just speaks to us, and that's I can't explain it nearly as eloquently as Joseph Campbell used to when he was still around and writing and things like that. But that's the basic gist of it. Yeah. That's the way I take it.
You got to read the book to get, obviously the full story.
I don't get any royalties, by the way.
No, but I think, what he's got is and I've heard it said before, don't know who said it, so, somebody out there in the comments section can reference this one. But whoever said it, there are so many stories, but so few stories to tell, but so many rich characters. So, it's the characters that draw us in, because really when it comes down to conflict, it's always like, sorry for being sexist, but man versus man versus nature, man versus self, man versus, man versus the group or the system. Every story kind of encompasses that, whether it's, obviously just, the hero versus the villain, that's a man versus man. The hero versus the system. I kind of think of the Matrix, actually, is that even though you got Agent Smith, but he kind of represents the system that Neo is fighting against.
He's the one. He believes in the system, and this is the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And I'm doing my job, and then eventually, he goes rogue a little bit.
Sure.
But his purpose is to do the bidding
of the Matrix.
Of the Matrix.
The system.
Yeah, because he's a part of the Matrix. He's just a function of the Matrix. Yeah. And in a way, it's his character development that he becomes a little bit more human, I guess you could say, and that allows him to do his to have freedom of choice basically and do his own will, and it basically becomes a revenge story for Agent Smith more than I'm doing what the Matrix wants. No, I mean he hacked back in and is doing something the Matrix doesn't want him to do. I don't know why we're talking so much about the Matrix. No, I'm not even that big of a fan of it, but there is some interesting stuff. My favorite, while we're on it, just real quick, one of my favorite theories about the Matrix is that when they are in the real world, on the real Earth, that it's actually just another Matrix. And that's why he's able to still manipulate the machines and things like that, and he's actually still able to have all of his powers. So it's one of my favorite theories for the Matrix.
It's kind of like the Inception. What's the dream?
He's just at another level of the Matrix.
Of the dream, the system of some sort. But there's that. And natural disaster movies. We have the Man versus Nature. You might say a movie back in the 1990s, Twister, or any of the volcano movies we have. Where it's nature against man. But actually,
Tornado versus cow, best fight ever.
Yes, right? I know. Yeah, tornado. But it's like, but even those films, it actually turns out to be, the person, the main character being in conflict with themselves, and really just the natural disaster is actually because person versus themselves is that they're having that inner conflict and they're spending that time.
Well, everybody, you've got the bad general who thinks this is the way we're going to save everybody from this apocalypse, and then you've got the family who's like, no, we found out the real truth. This is what you need to do to stop the world from having another earthquake. So you're fighting against nature, but you're really having to circumvent around other humans who are getting in your way from saving the day. I think is like you've got that kind of double conflict in those kinds of disaster movies. So
and somebody's got to have control when they can't. They find out they can't control nature, obviously, and they can't control a system of people or a group of people, but they need to have that control and all that. So we know that from some of the great, villains, and even a villain that is having an inner conflict. Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. Norman Bates. He's got this craziness. He's psycho. So it's all happening up here. That's where the real conflict is happening. So he's the main character of that, film. I think of the what's the other one? It's like, man versus man, obviously man versus the group. The group is kind of the system and the nature. We've kind of gone over that. But, I find it, interesting when, let's say you do have, a very action-heavy physical. Let's, kind of break it down to the popcorn muncher films, of course. When I was just like, oh, that's great fight. But what is it that drew us in? I'm going to go way back to my childhood of Terminator 2 Judgment Day. What a great example of some awesome action scenes, and, explosions going on, great stunt work and all that, and you can, just shovel popcorn. But then, you watch it more now that I'm an adult and I can slow down and actually kind of dissect all that, and I look at the fact that the predictability factor was kind of thrown off because for people at that time thought Arnold's character is the bad guy, and I knew unfortunately going into that film even as a kid that he's actually the good guy in this one. In the first film, he was the bad guy, so you expected him to be the bad guy. Now he's the guardian of...
Spoiler warning.
Yes. I hope you've seen...
30 years later.
Yeah, I hope you've seen Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Great film. But it's like, he's protecting this young child. And even in that first scene, he's, they're throwing you off. He's got the gun pulled, and he's like, get down. And he's protecting him, and he pulls him behind him, and he blocks the bullets with his physical body, from the T-1000, just blasting away, smashes open that door, gets the kid in there, and then they have this great kind of choreographed fight, and constantly, they're... And
then the chase scene after, even, like that on top of it, with the semi and going down into the, I guess it's like the
gully area,
the in the freeway area, that empty. I don't know what you call that in LA.
Something to get waterway of some sort. But that was an awesome scene with that and the motorcycles and and that chase scene, and the whole time is he's putting he's a cyborg physical body on the line to protect this this very sensitive.
But you can see that but in that scene it's like, yes, he is this powerful Terminator guy, but you can see this new Terminator, he's completely outmatched too. So in lies the drama. How is he going to beat this guy?
Right.
So, and it's like, and you got to root for Arnold, right? I mean, back in the day, Arnold was I mean, I don't think he really, I mean, Arnold, I can't ever remember a movie where he really played a superhero. But I mean, just as a actor, to me as a kid, Arnold Schwarzenegger was a superhero. He was, as an actor, was a superhero. I just loved everything he did, from all that, just because he was that action star, I think. And I think in his own way is like a persona of that movie star. The movie star was a superhero. And now you've just got actual good superhero movies now out today.
Right.
But I think, maybe that's a bygone thing, and we'll never really see that. Because you've got the guys like Liam Neeson and stuff who do a lot of the action stuff now, and nothing against those. And Liam Neeson, pound for pound, is probably a better actor than Arnold Schwarzenegger, probably by a long shot.
Not going to argue. Not going to argue with that at all.
But as an action star, like, is Liam on that level that Arnold once was years and years ago? I don't think there's a comparison there either.
No, you're right.
I don't think anybody is to that level Arnold was. I know we're getting off topic.
No, it's fine.
But I mean, but that's kind of what the show's about. Like, we're going to be all over the place. We try to keep it into a neat little line, but sometimes we'll run over.
And I think there's one more kind of thing to bring into the mix of what makes a good fight, and maybe we can move on to another topic and we even split the episode at that point. But passion. That what is it about this fight that they're fighting? It's got great choreography, it's got great action and all that, but does it lack passion? And, are these, the characters in conflict with each other, passionate about what they're doing? I think of, back to sports movies, obviously Rocky, he is fighting for a certain reason, when he goes to Russia and fights Drago, and he's done that because he lost his friend to Drago, and he's, as a byproduct, there was this, great kind of freedom speech at the end and all that about change and things and changing for the better in the future. But, he was really actually going not for revenge, but in a lot of ways to kind of complete the work his friend, had done. And it's kind of cool that they now have the films coming out that are about that, his former opponent. And now, his former opponent's son, that he's trying to bring him up and train him and all that. I think that's kind of a cool idea. But yeah, he's passionate about that. Or another boxing movie, Cinderella Man, with...
that's an excellent film. That's just like, because he's fighting for his family, and he gets that moment where he's about to go down in that one fight, and he has that kind of vision of his family not being able to eat breakfast, and his daughter, I remember that one scene where he gave his daughter his steak in the morning. Like, she had already eaten, but she was still hungry. And he said, I had a big, dream. I had a dream that I had the biggest steak. I don't even think they were eating steak. They were eating something else. He said he had dreamed that he had ate a steak, so he was full. So he gave his food. Yeah. And so I remember, and anyway, he's having this scene of them. I mean, it's during the Great Depression, basically. Right. So, not basically, it is. And then he snaps out of it and then goes on to have like a long reign as heavyweight champion, and it's based on a true story. So, but just that motivating factor of basically survival at that point. Yes, he's in the ring, not going to get... And they do bring that prospect in later in the movie of the guy, this guy's killed 3 people in the ring, don't fight him. But at that moment, it's not like his life was necessarily... Yes, in jeopardy, they added that component, but I think the real heart mover there is the family aspect and wanting to protect your family from death, basically, because, I mean, starving to death is obviously a real thing. Yes. So, yeah, I mean, that to me, I remember watching that movie, and it came out right around the time Episode 3 Star Wars did, and I walked out and I said, wow, that was better than Star Wars. Like it was really that moving of a movie. But
I think, the passion, part of that, obviously that was right in there. You could feel that whether you were, I'm a dad, but, I think even I saw that film before I was a dad, and I felt, a connection with the Russell Crowe's character in that. I'll tell you one that is probably, going back to Star Wars. Passion comes into it, but choreography definitely didn't, was Obi-Wan and Darth Vader in Episode 4, A New Hope. It's not very well choreographed. This, Alec Guinness.
It's more of an imagined past. We don't really get the whole thing. He just kind of says, we don't know the whole truth is what I'm saying at that point. And he's like, I used to teach this guy, and he turned on this other guy that I used to work with, basically. Right. And so, this guy's evil. And they've got to pass it in a way. Like, sometimes that's cool, as a fandom, because it's like, what is their power? Like, what's the real thing? And, how did that fight go? So then we see that, which I actually had in our notes as, an underrated fight, which I know, how could you put Star Wars and underrated in anything, because
Yeah.
it's rated by, so many, whether it's good or bad ratings, it's rated. So it's hard to say underrated. But look, I mean, that you finally get that payoff of all of that hype in that movie. Obviously, the choreography in that fight was off the chain. It was almost, it was really like a dance. In a fight in the sequences, but there's all of that history now that we've seen on screen between episodes 1, 2, and halfway through episodes 3 at that point, and then we've got the original trilogy. We know the whole truth at this point, for several years, and we've just been so there's the hype factor too of waiting, and we've been the palpable hype of waiting for something for years and years and years, and then we get that fight. And as far as could it live up to the hype? Probably never could, and the prequels get a lot of hate even to this day. But I think because of that, that's why I'll say underrated for me with that, because everybody likes to focus on the negative of those movies sometimes, and it's like, well, let's look at the positives in that fight. Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen put a lot of work in, and if you watch any behind-the-scenes stuff, you can see that. And just from the physical things that they did, and then the backstory of their relationship, and then in that encounter, and Obi-Wan's basically backed into a corner and has to chop his person he's basically raised and mentored since they were 9 or 10 years old, and he's basically forced to maim and at the time thinking killing him. For me, like, that's I won't say it's my best fight, but I would say it's right up there for me.